was very odd because they'd all sold really well. And I never quite... I did ask her about this once, but she was a bit evasive on why she hadn't continued with that. I mean, Nadine Dorries says that she blazed a trail for her. I mean, she sold millions of books, and it was Anne Widdecombe that gave her the idea, I think.
Oh, she also had this a short stint, I saw. I didn't know this, actually, but I discovered yesterday she had a short stint as an agony aunt, which is not exactly what you would have taken from her public...
Well, if Richard Madeley can do it in the Telegraph, I don't see why Anne Widdecombe couldn't. But yes, it was a sort of unlikely career, let's put it that way.
I think the most interesting thing about her, I mean, as I said, in my mind, she's a very modern politician, in spite of what people might say about her attitudes and policies, but her capacity to be both this great public figure with a persona that was large, you know, the expression larger than life, but also to be able to talk policy is still quite unusual.
And she loved talking about policy. She always said that Jonathan Dimbleby was her favourite interviewer because he used to do a Sunday lunchtime show on ITV for an hour with a studio audience with one guest. You wouldn't get that now, would you? And she loved the fact that she could develop an argument, that she could explain her policies. And she said, you just don't get that chance anymore. You've got to come up with the soundbite. And she enjoyed the cut and thrust of a long-form interview. And she was, I mean, you know, that she was a great person to interview. Because she was basically, in some ways, a bit of a ham actor, in that you saw an exaggerated version sometimes of Anne Widdecombe. And I remember I did an hour with her in the 2019 general election, and I asked her about her views on equal marriage. Why are you asking me this? What a preposterous... I said, would she reverse it? What a preposterous question. Of course I wouldn't. Let's talk about the election. And she would really give you both barrels sometimes.
Steve, you must have come across her as a reporter.
Yeah, and as an interviewer. And she had a profound impact on me, actually, because Iain mentioned her early books, and I think I interviewed her at a book festival after her first novel came out. It was in Dartington. And the hall was absolutely packed, hundreds of people, standing room only. And she was sharp on the way the modern media world was going. And she said to me, this is incredible, if I was giving a local talk to my Tory association, it'd be about 12 people. But at a book festival, there is this huge appetite in sort of live events with political figures and everything. I now do, as Iain does, lots of live shows. And it was she who kind of thought, oh, yeah. And, of course, she really developed that in a way that was very modern, actually. You know, for someone whose views, she would say herself, were old-fashioned. She had a real feel for this landscape and hunger for live events. And as Iain said, she was a performer.
She said she thought she'd revived the public meeting, which in the 40s and 50s, you would have 200 people in a village hall because they wanted to hear a local politician. Nowadays, you get 3 men and a dog. And she reckoned the secret was to charge people for coming so they would value it.
Annabel, how important she moved from the Conservative Party to Reform, and she became an important spokesperson for Reform. How important was she to Mr Farage and his endeavour?
Well, I think she was enormously important to Farage's various movements because she gave them credibility, and I think she paved the way for others to follow, to make that transition, that defection from the Conservative Party to the Brexit Party, or indeed to Reform. Of course, she was a staunch Brexiteer, and she and Nigel Farage were very much agreed on that, and she was an effective communicator. She had, as we've discussed, that authenticity that many people in modern politics seem to lack. And that's why she was able to connect with the public, not just through politics, of course, but in those appearances on reality television, on Strictly Come Dancing. And as I say, it's something that there's a dearth of, I feel, in the modern political era.
She wasn't a staunch Brexiteer until the referendum had happened, or it was happening. When I used to do these Evening with Anne Widdecombe shows, we did 50 or 60 across the country, I would ask her about Europe, and this was like 2002, 3, 4. And she said, the thing is, when people say they want to leave the EU, I always say to them, well, what comes afterwards? And they can't answer that question. So, no, I would not support leaving the EU. She was a massive supporter of Ken Clarke. She voted for him in 3 different leadership elections. So she came to the Brexit Party a little bit late.
One of the ironies, or I think unfairnesses, of politics, is that she'll probably be remembered for a single thing, which was the remark she directed at Michael Howard when she said there was something of the night about him, and that people say killed his first leadership bid for the Conservative Party. Steve, is that fair? I mean, because I don't think she was really much one for attacking other politicians, but she'll be remembered for that, won't she?
Well, it's the most vivid quote that she. But I don't think these political figures are just remembered for one thing. I think there are fuller lives in all these politicians. It's like, you know, on that bigger canvas, people say Blair will only be remembered for Iraq. I suspect it will be much fuller than that. No, I mean, Iain knew her much better, but I didn't get the impression she was malevolent. But it did conjure up rather brilliantly a caricature. Again, it's a caricature of Michael Howard, which Michael Howard actually is a very nice guy who I got to know quite well. And so it was an unfair caricature, but it evoked something that resonated powerfully, and that quote will endure. We may return to that, but let's get some reaction from government now, and I can speak live to the Trade Minister, Sir Chris Bryant. Chris, if I may, can we just start with Anne Widdecombe? What are your memories of her as a parliamentarian? Chris, it seems we have a bit of a problem with Chris Bryant's sound, so we'll come back to him in a moment. Annabel, can I pursue this point about that Iain was really making, and actually Steve also, in a funny way, her as an entertainer, furnisher of sound bites, and so on. Is this the way of modern politics?
I'm afraid so. We now live in a vibes era, and the way that and an attention economy, and the way that you get that attention, the way that you make a name for yourself politically is through the soundbite. And actually, I think Kemi Badenoch, over the last year or so, one of the reasons why she's pulled ahead of other party leaders on the popularity front is because she's begun to grasp this. What we've noticed in particularly her PM's Q's performances is that she is thinking about the soundbite. She is thinking about getting a punchy message across in 30 to 60 seconds, which can then be clipped and be promoted across social media. And indeed, we've had AI interpretations, remixes of some of those appearances. And I do think that that is giving her, more attention. It's enabling her to cut through at a time when the Tory party is politically, still so toxic. So these do seem to be the political times that we're living in, and part of the problem, I think, is that you don't seem to get a lot of the deep thinking. And this is to Iain's point, the longer form interview. You don't have politicians whose ideas are being rigorously tested in the way they were in previous decades.
Let's go back to Chris Bryant. I think we can hear you now, Chris. I wonder if you could start the answer you were giving me about your memories of Anne Widdecombe again, please. Well, we're talking about modern politics. Unfortunately, our technical capabilities probably still somewhere in the 17th century. No, sometimes it just goes wrong, and we cannot, I think, hear Chris Bryant. We will try to work out what has happened, but happily we have three guests here who could probably...
Capable of padding.
who are capable of talking interestingly for the next hour and a half. Actually, because this allows me to talk about one of my own obsessions, which is this issue of how modern politicians behave and what they do. One of the things that strikes me, Iain, is that when you think about who does this well, obviously Donald Trump, obviously, actually, Nigel Farage. It's interesting that they all seem to be, people on the right seem to be much more successful at this than on the left. I'm struggling to think of a figure on the left who is really great at this.
Well, let me put Andy Burnham to you, because, OK, he's not yet
So
Prime
far.
Minister. So far. One of the reasons the Labour Party has got rid of Keir Starmer is because he's not a good communicator. And one of the reasons they've highlighted on Andy Burnham is partly because he wanted them to, but also because he is a good communicator. He's a good salesman, and you do need to do that. If you want to succeed in politics nowadays, you've got to be able to market your product. Now, so far, I think Andy Burnham's weakness is that he hasn't got a product to market. Now, that may be a cynical view, and it may be that sort of come the day that he becomes Prime Minister in 8 days' time, that he will have this very well-developed policy programme and we'll actually understand what he stands for. But at the moment, the other reason that they got rid of Keir Starmer was because he didn't seem to stand for anything. Nobody knew what his vision was. Well, nobody knows what Andy Burnham's vision is. So it's a bit odd in some ways to replace like with like, and he's got a record of flip-flopping on virtually everything.
I find this curious, this thing that no one knows what he's about. And I've got a feeling that in a few months' time, when he does some of the things he's been talking about doing, people will say, why weren't we told he was doing this when he has told us quite a lot? So, you know, we know about his plans to transfer power through devolution. Now, whether it happens or not, let's wait and see, but I think he means it. We know when he talks about the failings of an outsourced state that he plans to address some of the things like the privatisation.
He says he wants to do all these things, but never gives any detail as to how he's actually going to do it.
He gives, I think, as much detail as any leadership candidate in a mid-term contest has done. If you look back at any mid-term... I know this is a weird one because there's only one candidate, which it makes it very weird.
Well, steady on. There are other candidates, Count Binface, and we will no doubt at some point put up the slide with all the candidates.
I think he's fighting a slightly different contest to the Andy Burnham one.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon, yes.
Yeah, I'm talking about the current leadership contest. You know, Iain interviewed Boris Johnson during the Tory leadership contest of that era. And Johnson's policies, well, we're going to leave Europe by October, come what may, and it was impossible. And we were going to do social care. How? He didn't say. It never happened. So people don't tend to give huge amounts of detail because it implies spending and tax plans. But I think we do have a sense of what he is about, as clear as any mid-term parliamentary leadership.
And Annabel, I think you reading your columns, I think you've got a pretty good idea of what he's about, and you don't like it very much.
Well, I think we can anticipate a pretty strong lurch to the left under Andy Burnham, particularly on the economy. However, I do agree with Iain that he's performed a number of U-turns. We don't know exactly where he stands or what he intends to do when it comes to our relationship with the European Union. Of course, he famously said, alarmingly, about 6 months ago that we oughtn't to be in hock to the bond markets, only to row back from that when he realised that it would cause intense market jitters if he ever were to enter Downing Street. So, you know, it is mixed messaging. And the contrast with Andy Burnham and perhaps Boris Johnson, or maybe a better example is Liz Truss, is at least with those previous Conservative leaders, you had some sense what their guiding philosophy might be, what they fundamentally believe.
Before we come back to that, let's give Chris Bryant one more go. Chris, I hope you can hear me. And
can you hear me, Mother? Can you hear me, Mother?
We're here.
That's an old gag.
Go on. You were speaking about Anne Widdecombe.
I was. The weird thing is, I mean, obviously, the events of this week are horrific, and I can only feel for the family. It must be ghastly, not only what it seems has happened, but also to have to go through all of this in the public domain. One of the horrific parts of political life, of course. I hardly knew Anne, is the honest truth. I mean, in 25 years in Parliament, I don't know that she and I ever said a word to each other. I did have one moment before Parliament when I was... I just stopped being a priest in the Church of England, and I did a Lent programme about St Paul on Radio 4 with her, which was kind of entertaining. But look, I mean, to use words from the song, from La Cage aux Folles, from the song I Am What I Am, she was her own special creation. And, you know, some people absolutely adored that and some people were not so fussed. As I say, my heart goes out to her family.
Thank you. Can we talk about, just very briefly, about events this morning where the government is on the issue of the Strait of Hormuz, which we're given to understand now has effectively been closed again. Is there a government view about where we are on that?
Well, the government view is that the Straits of Hormuz should be open. And as I said when I was first interviewed about this several months ago, it's a bit daft to go into a war if you don't know how you're going to get out of it. I think, you know, a lot of people around the world will be anxious about their own economic security because of the situation in the Gulf. And we want everybody to de-escalate. Of course, it's crazy that Iran is still attacking others. And we want everybody to get around the table and negotiate a solution.
But of course, the agent of chaos, as some people describe him, is President Trump. How do you think your new leader is going to deal with that? If the first thing he has to say to him is, could you essentially fix this?
My guess is that Trump himself wants to fix it now because, you know, it's having a pretty dire effect not only on economic prosperity in the United States of America and on pump prices and so on, but also on the fortunes of political parties in the United States of America. So I think everybody wants to sort it. The question is whether there's the will to make that happen. And look, just about Andy, I remember when I started as trade minister back last September, one of my counterparts, actually the Saudi counterpart, said to me, my friend, likability is bankability. And I think that there's a truth in that, especially in international politics. I don't want to exaggerate it. You know, just being a nice guy isn't enough. But I think one of the great advantages about Andy is that Andy, it's not his first rodeo. He knows exactly how the ball bucks, rather. And I think that gives you an advantage of somebody who's seen it from the inside, gone to Manchester, you know, done politics in a different way, and is coming back and wants to change things.
I'm guessing from that answer that you signed his nomination form. You're one of the 403 or whatever it is, Labour MPs who signed it. But
I don't think it's quite at 403, Trevor, but yes, I have signed nomination papers. And look, I think if we got something wrong just after the general election in July 2024, and I understand why we did this, we didn't want to look triumphalist, partly because we knew that we hadn't particularly won the general election because everybody thought we were fabulous. In part, we'd won the general election because everybody thought that the Tories were absolutely useless and wanted an end to 14 years of what they'd done. But it meant that we were a bit gloomy. Excessively gloomy, and I don't think that was good for British politics. And what's the point of the Labour Party if it's not about hope and aspiration and people wanting to get on in life and be able to do better than their children did? And I think that sense of hope is and a passionate desire for change. All of that, I think, is what Andy embodies.
We did hear all of that. In July 2024, desire for change and all of that. And it takes me to a question that I asked your colleague Lucy Powell last week. I'm not sure I got an answer, so let me try again with you. Prime Minister said that over the past 2 years, he has rebuilt the public services, restored economic stability, he's legislated for better pay and new employment rights for workers. He's delivered... he's changed the Labour Party. He's essentially delivered Labour's earthly paradise. So, why did you sign his nomination forms? Why do you want to change when he's done all these wonderful things?
Well, just to correct you slightly, Trevor, I understand the first part, but then you said that Keir Starmer had said that we'd created an earthly paradise. Nobody's ever said that.
No, he didn't say that. I said that. But
yeah,
I'm summarising his many explanations, his list of things that he's done terrifically well.
So for me, actually, two things at the top of the list would be that we've taken more children out of poverty than any government in history. So 500,000 kids.
Yeah, I know that's on the list, but that question I asked you is why are you changing him if he's done all these great things?
Well, I think we all listened to what we heard on the doorstep. I'm a Welsh MP. In the Senate elections, we crashed to one of our worst disasters in a very, very long time, and that's particularly painful here locally. And it's true across the whole of the rest of the UK. We face terrible electoral problems, and we heard on the doorsteps exactly what people were saying. And I think some of this is very, very unfair about Keir, but a lot of people don't like him. I mean, it's just a fact.
But you see why I'm baffled about this. You see why I'm baffled about this. You heard on the doorsteps. Well, in July 2024, you had the best expression of what the doorsteps thinks, which is to elect Keir Starmer Prime Minister. Now you've got some local elections where people were a bit miserable and yelled at you when you canvassed and so on, and you kicked him out. Isn't that a bit rough?
Trevor, it was worse than that. I mean, the electoral, to go in Wales, to go to, I think we only got 11% of the vote. I mean, it was a very significant way of saying, and I've been MP here for 25 years. We've been through ups and downs. This was not just one of the parts of the normal part of, political to and fro and the swingometer, as it were. This was a very, very severe reprimand by the British voters saying, you've got to do better. And look, politics is never fair. It's never meant to be fair. It's not designed to be fair. I pay enormous tribute to Keir for taking the Labour Party from complete unelectability to winning an enormous majority in 2024. But we made some mistakes. And the thing I had most commonly on the doorstep was winter fuel allowance. And then 20 miles an hour.
OK, last point on this then. Is it a bit weird? There's, whatever it is, 400 plus of you, that you want to get rid of this guy, you have to go and find somebody who wasn't even an MP to lead you. That says something pretty damning about your party.
I don't see it that way. I've always thought that one of the oddities about the British system is it's very difficult you could be a regional powerhouse of a politician and not have any role in Parliament and not be able to come into power. The Spanish Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, wasn't an MP when he became Prime Minister. In other countries, in France, for instance, regional mayors are much more significant than they are in the UK. And I think that's one of the things that's got to change about the way we do politics in the UK. We're far, far, far too centralised. It can't all be about London and the South East.
OK. Your colleague Louise Haigh said this week that the team around Andy Burnham has been preparing its plans for government for a year or so. Were you part of the plot?
I've not been part of anything. No, I've just been cracking on with getting my...
Are you a bit cheesed off that while you've been working, got your sleeves rolled up, you've been doing all the stuff, all these people have been conspiring to throw out your boss?
I'm not cheesed off. No, I'm afraid I'm one of the eternal optimists. And I have just been getting on with my job. And indeed, all this week, I've been having fairly detailed conversations with another country about getting another trade deal over the line, which, God willing, inshallah, we will get over the line tomorrow morning, and which might be worth billions of pounds extra for the UK economy. I got the GCC deal done earlier on this year. We got the new deal with South Korea done. So, look, honestly, we've just been getting on with that.
When you're sitting down with these people, Chris, and they're seeing... We're about to throw out the Prime Minister. You're talking trade deals and all that. Presumably, in the side meetings when you're having a cup of tea and so on, do they ask what is happening in your country, or do they think this is all sort of normal?
Yes, quite often people have said, will this deal stick if there's a change and so on? And I've been very clear that it will. There are some areas of work that I've been working on, which I know I won't be able to get done in the next week. But I think it was Tagore, the Indian writer, who said, the person who plants a tree knowing he will never sit under its shade is the person who has begun to understand the meaning of life. So I might be doing things which other people end up getting over the line. But that's good. That's what politics is all about.
You're reminding us, Chris, that
you try to come up with solutions. You work with colleagues, sometimes in your own party, sometimes in other political parties. Sometimes the negotiations with other departments in your own government are more difficult than negotiating with another country.
I love the fact that you're reminding us that on Sunday mornings you used to preach sermons professionally. But the reason I'm asking these questions is most people will be asking, in 9 days' time, what's going to change? Andy Burnham says he's going to stick to the fiscal rules that Rachel Reeves has laid down. He'll stick to the 2024 manifesto. He won't abolish the pension triple-lock. Thus far, the only thing that I can see that is going to be different is the Prime Minister's wardrobe. What actually is going to change?
Well, I'm not Andy Burnham's spokesperson, so I need to be a little bit careful here. But I think what will change is, what needs to change? Number one, we've got to get quicker at making decisions as a government and being able to take things through to conclusion, because I think people are passionate about and frustrated about the delay in change. So we've got to do that. Secondly, I think we will want to devolve far more from central government. That is a good thing. I think most decisions should be made closest to the people that most affect them. A third thing is we've got to completely change the way we do politics. If somebody from another political party, and I would include Reform in this, wants to sit round the table with me and work out a better way of a better solution to a particular problem facing the country, whether it's social care or it's a trade deal with the United States of America or whatever it may be, then that's what we should do. And we should stop all this endless, the vitriol and the poison that is so present, and I would argue has been so present in the political sphere in the UK since the referendum in 2016. Well, I think that needs to change.
OK, well, here's a good test of that. Your Home Secretary is going to introduce legislation this week to reform immigration and asylum. One of the things that she wants to do is to double the length of time migrants have to wait before they can apply for permanent settlement. That's the kind of thing that both the Conservatives and Reform will approve of. But 80 of your own MPs have written to Andy Burnham saying, please drop this. Now, by what you've just said, actually, you could get a consensus across Parliament, though it would probably mean annoying quite a lot of your own backbenchers. Where do you stand? Are you going to back the Home Secretary, or will you back Labour rebels who want her plans to be dished?
Well, by definition, that wouldn't be consensus. Consensus is only when you've got literally everybody signed up to the same view. And I think that is often very difficult to achieve, obviously. But I think where the consensus lies is that we have to be able to defend our borders. We want to make sure that there are safe and appropriate legal routes for people to be able to come to the UK, but that illegal migration is bad. And for that matter, I would want to make it much more possible for people to stay in their own home countries. That's the ideal, isn't it?
Everybody agrees about that. The thing that people don't agree about is the indefinite leave for remain. And I'm asking you, you may or may not be in the next administration. I'm asking you, will you support Shabana Mahmood's intention to go ahead with this legislation and this reform when a large number of your own backbenchers don't want it, though others across Parliament do, and indeed quite a lot of the country wants it?
I don't know the specifics of the policy, and I don't know how this is going to roll out. And of course, you don't only have to achieve consensus in the House of Commons, you also have to then get it through the House of Lords as well. So that's a whole process still to come. I'm just giving you my basic instincts, which is that I know as a Rhondda and Ogmore MP, people are concerned here about the levels of illegal migration to the UK and the number of people that sometimes come as associated people alongside other people who've got a right to come here. So I know it's the number one thing that my constituents want us to get on top of. That's all I can give you is my basic instinct, I'm afraid.
Okay. Chris, thank you very much for your patience this morning. But before you go, I just want to ask you Obviously,
You
I'm going
tried to
ask you...
cancel me several times.
Yeah, somebody's cancelled you. OK, they're fired, whoever they are. You can't cancel Sir Chris Bryant. Just before we go, if England win the World Cup, what do you reckon? Bank holiday?
Look, I mean, amazing last night, absolutely amazing, and well done, Jude Bellingham. It's not for me to decide whether there should be a bank holiday. All I know is that if England win, and I'm going to use this phrase again. Actually, my favourite word in all languages is the Spanish word ojalá, which means if only, or I would that, I hope that. So ojalá England wins. Then I think it'd be quite difficult to get anybody into work for quite a while. I know that shouldn't be my formal position as a government minister, but I'm just saying what I think is likely to happen. Trevor, you probably won't. Well, you're finishing here soon, aren't you? Is this like your last week?
No. I'll be here for another couple of weeks. I'm going to turn up, mate, because actually, you know, we here at Sky, we're in a salt mine. We keep going, but now we've heard the government's position. If you stay up late and it's a bit tough, we'll understand.
No, it's not. Of course, it's not. I'm being silly. But actually, a really important point, just as Trade Minister. One of the things that the UK is really good at is running events and all the admin around events and logistics and stuff. And that's why, as Trade Minister, I've been to Morocco. I've talked with the Saudis about helping with their World Cup preparations for future years, because there's real economic opportunities for British businesses. We're really good at exporting services. It's one of the things that we should do better. And if England wins, I'm really hopeful that every single country that is planning future World Cup and other major international events will be recruiting British businesses to help them run them. Oh,
great ad for British business. Sir Chris Bryant, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Well, let's see what our panel made of all that. I haven't introduced them properly, apparently, so let's do that now. We're joined all morning by the author and LBC presenter, Iain Dale, who happens to have a new book out, his autobiography, and it's called Have I Said Too Much? Not yet. The senior political commentator at the Telegraph, Annabel Denham, and the columnist and broadcaster, Steve Richards. Steve, you were saying a moment ago that we do know quite a lot of what Burnham had in mind. But I have to say, both Lucy Powell last week and this week, Chris Bryant, don't really seem to be able to describe what the change is going to be. And outside of SW1, where we worry about people's capacity to present and how good they are on telly, I think it's still a bit of a mystery. Why?
Well, why we don't know
why the
more.
Labour Party wants to get rid of Keir Starmer, other than they hear that nobody likes him?
Well, I think you heard it from Chris Bryant, that the slaughter in the May elections, Scotland, Wales, North East England...
But will a guy who comes on with no change in policy going to make any difference?
I think there will be a change in policy. You know, to understand him, look at what Burnham has said about what he thinks has gone wrong. And he goes back over 40 years and talks about deindustrialisation, Brexit, the austerity period from 2010. And so that is the sort of wider context. Now, that implies all sorts of things. If you think towns have been left behind, you are going to try and reconnect them. If you think the state has been dysfunctional for various reasons, partly to do with previous economic policies, you are going to try and remake it. So I think there is an outline. Now, what I was arguing earlier is that in leadership contests, you really don't get much more than an outline, because you've got to come in and deal with tax and spend, and you are constrained by the previous election and the mandate on what that was won on. And that is a huge constraint for him. But I think there is a sense of what he feels.
Iain, what do you think? Are we going to see change or not?
Well, we don't know. He's done one interview in this campaign with Andrew Marr. He's done that, and that was what 11 days ago. Why hasn't he been in front of the cameras telling us what he's going to do? He's written an article on foreign policy, which was basically a message to the Labour Party members, you can trust me on Gaza. Nothing else. We have no idea what his views are on Ukraine or any other foreign policy issue. We don't know what he really thinks about defence. So he's a blank canvas. Now, that can be a strength, actually. And he may surprise us all. And I wish him well. If the Prime Minister of this country succeeds, we all succeed. And I like some of the things he said in that speech a couple of weeks ago about devolution. But we've heard it all before from successive Prime Ministers about devolving power to local areas. Well, if he manages to do what every other Prime Minister hasn't done because of resistance within the Whitehall machine, because Whitehall is there to protect its own interests in many ways, the civil service, and they will not willingly give up powers to local areas.
There are people who think that there should be a general election. We are, as I never tire of pointing out, I think we're about to get the 7th of the last 10 Prime Ministers appointed by their own party rather than winning an election. Some people feel comfortable about that, others not. What do you think, Annabel?
I think it's unlikely that we're going to have a general election. Now, this week, Kemi Badenoch wrote an opinion piece which certainly seemed to suggest that the Tories are gearing up for a snap poll, or perhaps at least that's what they want the public to believe. Their feeling is that Andy Burnham is potentially sharpening his electoral offer, and the most recent evidence of that was his softening of the stance on Gaza, the fact that he felt that he needed to make an apology on behalf of Keir Starmer for nominally the Prime Minister's position at the start of that conflict. So there is a strong argument that Andy Burnham goes to the public for him as well, because he will never have as much political capital as he does currently, and he will find that it depreciates extremely quickly. Now, this week, in scenes redolent of North Korea, we had many members of the Parliamentary Labour Party queuing up outside the Parliamentary Labour Party office to nominate Andy Burnham. But we shouldn't be fooled. There is a lot of division across the Labour Party. They are not aligned on some of the key issues. And the fact that Andy Burnham is going to find that his hands are tied, particularly on the economy and particularly with the tax triple lock as set out in the 2024 Labour manifesto, in which it promised it would not raise income tax, VAT or national insurance. Where is he going to raise the money in order to deliver on some of the promises that we've heard him made thus far? And in terms of it having more than a faint whiff of Starmerism, ultimately he's promising change. His diagnosis of the problem is very similar to previous Prime Ministers. But what is he actually going to do differently?
I want to come back to talk about what options he has and what he might expect. But let's remember that there are other political parties. So let's get a view from the Conservatives now. A little earlier, I spoke to the Shadow Chancellor, Sir Mel Stride. Mel Stride, we are speaking in the aftermath of the dreadful murder of Anne Widdecombe. Can I ask you first for your memories of her?
So, can I firstly say that my heart goes out to her family, to her friends and all those who knew Anne. My recollections of her, and I knew her a little bit, particularly my early days as a Member of Parliament, because, of course, she is a local constituent, or was, is somebody who was extremely forthright, very clear in what they believed. Not everybody agreed with her, but she knew where she stood. But she combined it with enormous energy, that twinkle in her eye, and a lot of personality. And I think that was the combination that really caught people, I would say.
I thought it was interesting that Kemi Badenoch, in paying tribute to her and sending condolences to Nigel Farage and Reform, she said that both parties had lost a friend, implying that you are in some way part of the same family. I mean, not to get into the vulgar politics of it, but was she actually a loss to your party, do you feel?
I think Anne was somebody who has obviously gone on a political journey and was with the Conservative Party and latterly with Reform. But I think what we should probably focus on is not so much that political journey that she went on, but just her as a rather special, remarkable lady who will be sorely missed. And I wouldn't read anything more than that into what Kemi
But I suppose the reason I'm asking that question is that there's a sense that, for a moment, what you might call human feeling trumped the partisan hostilities that we all deal with. And the same thing happened after the death of Joe Cox and David Amess.
Yeah.
I suppose many people might ask, why does it always take a tragedy for that sense that, you know, we're all after the same thing to come through?
Well, I think it's just one of those facts of life, isn't it? And it's a very human thing, that when something terribly tragic occurs, particularly the loss of somebody's life, that is always a moment for reflection. And I think that's part of the human condition, and that's probably quite a good thing in and of itself. But I think in terms of the politics here, if we just come out a bit and look at the Conservative Party and look at the Reform Party, there is an ocean of difference between us as political parties. And I would argue that is around, on the economic front, fiscal responsibility. We stand up for that. We will always make sure that the numbers add up, whereas Reform will come out with endless promises to catch the headlines which haven't been thought through. And that always leads, Trevor, to a bad place. So I don't think we are, or she is, in any way stepping away from the fact that Reform are not the answer to the challenges, certainly on the economy, that the country faces.
Well, I want to return to Reform in a moment, but let's talk about the government for a moment. The Chancellor's announcing a major package of measures aimed at small and medium-sized enterprise, a sort of going away present, I guess, because nobody expects her to be Chancellor next week. Are you going to welcome these measures?
Well, I think the way that Rachel is going about trying to boost business here is to underwrite loans and reduce the risk of those loans into the business sector.
Funneling them through the British Business Bank.
Exactly, but she's doing it at the same time as holding businesses back by ramping up those businesses with eye-watering taxes, going out borrowing a lot of money, spending a lot of money. We're seeing inflation for the last 20 months running ahead of target. That's a pressure on business and people's living standards as well. And, of course, unemployment now at a 5-year high, with youth unemployment off the scale. So those are the things that she should be addressing, not so much just focusing on, well, how do I try and gee up a bit of activity?
But what she's doing can't be bad from your point of view, can it?
Sorry, say again.
What she's doing can't be bad from your point of view. You're supposed to be the party of small business.
OK, so if the question is how do you mobilise capital into small and medium-sized enterprises, plus scale-ups, etc., we have spoken, Kemi and I, very recently about our city reforms. So there we're talking about, to get a little bit technical, the end of ring fencing for banks, changes to the capital requirements around banks, so we're more in line with our international competitors. And as a consequence of that, you can free up to about £450 billion of additional lending, much of it into the domestic business sector. That is the way to drive growth. So you've got to get the fundamentals in the economy right, get taxes down, get on top of welfare, get people off benefits into work, make those kind of changes at the same time as mobilising capital through the markets rather than government stepping in the way that she's suggesting.
Well, look, to do any of this, you've got to get back into office. And here's a puzzling thing. You're not putting up a candidate in Clacton in the by-election, called by Mr Farage. So I suppose you'll be advising the voters of Clacton to vote for Count Binfait.
Well, it's for the voters of Clacton to decide where they vote. But let's just be clear.
You've decided you're not in the contest.
Well,
surely you think you want to say something in a democracy to voters. What would be best?
I don't think political parties are in the habit of going around and endorsing other political parties or candidates.
Well, that's my point. Most political why aren't you guys standing? Because political parties aren't in the habit of not competing.
Let me deal with that very directly. So let's be clear about what this by-election is about. It has been triggered by Nigel Farage himself. The reason he has done this is he is subject to an investigation by the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards around a £5 million donation that he received from a crypto billionaire based in Thailand, and decided that he would not declare and make public. And that is an ongoing investigation that the Commissioner is conducting. And Nigel Farage has decided that he wishes to distract from that and hold this by-election, incidentally, at great expense to the local electors in that area who will have to pay for it. And so under those circumstances, forgive us if we're not going to play his games.
To be fair, we did invite Reform to come on. They decided they didn't want to, but I guess if they were here, they'd say, they'd offered to pay for this, though I gather technically they can't do that. But let's be honest, if you thought you had the slightest chance of beating Farage in Clacton, you'd be putting up a candidate, wouldn't you?
No, because, as I say...
Really?
The
you
reason,
still thought you could win? You
why,
wouldn't,
no, what
compete.
matters is the principle, Trevor, and the principle is very clear, which is that this is all about trying to throw sand in everybody's face to try and distract them from the fact there's a very serious issue around a very, very large donation here, which is being looked into. And what Nigel Farage has decided to do...
about the donation?
It's right out of the
When you say a very large donation...
Sorry?
When you say a very large donation,
yes,
you've had way more money from big donors over recent years. What is the issue with this donation? That it's big? That it's from somebody you don't like?
The issue is following the rules. The public expect politicians to hold themselves to a high standard, and part of that is that they follow the rules, particularly when it comes to donations, and that donations are declared in the right way. Now, Nigel Farage received £5 million from a crypto billionaire based in Thailand, and he failed to declare that, even though it was received during a period in which a declaration might be required. So that's being looked into. He has his version of events, but it's being looked into by the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner, who is yet to report. But what Nigel Farage has decided to do is to throw sand up and smoke and mirrors and all the rest of it, have a by-election, shift the argument on to him versus the establishment and all these kind of arguments.
It is a bit
all that kind of stuff.
It is a bit disingenuous of you to say this. I mean, he would say, of course, as you say, he's got his explanation, which is this was a personal gift and all that. But I noticed that any time you guys mention this, you mention crypto billionaire based in Thailand, which has nothing to do with any of this. Either it's a technical issue of whether he reported it or not, or that you don't like the source of the donor, which is really what this is, isn't it?
Well, no, because
you want to cripple reform. And my point is that if you don't like the idea of big sums of money, you, the Conservative Party, you've had donations from people like Sainsbury amounting to over £10 million. You're going to suffer as much.
Yes, but those donations that you were referring to were done by the rules. In other words, they were transparently received in line with the rules. And I do think the circumstances around a donation matter, actually, because the test that's being applied here, or part of it under the rules, is whether others may reasonably conclude that a donation may affect a Member of Parliament's actions. So the context and who it is and where they are and what they do does actually matter in terms of that critical test. And that is, amongst other matters, what the Commissioner will be looking into. But as I say, all this circus around count bin phase and everything else has arisen because Nigel Farage does not like scrutiny. He's ducked out of all these... Do you remember he used to have all these press conferences every other minute?
I did.
Well, that stopped. He's run away. He's hiding, right? He's been hiding, and now he's obfuscated.
So to be clear, the issue is purely, from your point of view, one about his failure, as you would say, to report it. You wouldn't, therefore, support the suggestions that are circulating in government that the big donations of this kind should be limited to £100,000.
So, look, there's always going to be a debate about what a permissible donor should be. But what we are looking at here, and other matters...
I know that. We've been through that.
George Cottrell,
but one solution would be to say nobody can give more than £100,000. Would you back that?
There will always be space, and it's always appropriate to have a debate about this complex area of donations, and I don't think you can pick one little bit out in isolation and start to opine on that in and of itself. But the point here is very different. The point here is about following the existing rules, which are there for a good reason, and abiding by what Parliament has set up, which is a process, a democratically set up process for deciding whether members of Parliament actually stick to the rules. Now, Nigel Farage may not like that, but that doesn't justify him rushing off and, at vast expense, having this big circus around an unnecessary by-election.
Well, Stride, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, as mentioned, we did invite Reform onto the programme again this week, but no one was available. That by-election in Clacton was also mentioned, and here's a list of the candidates standing. Before we go on, I should just make clear that the Sainsbury to whom I referred is Lord John Sainsbury, whose cousin, David Sainsbury, is a large donor to the Labour Party. John Sainsbury was a conspicuously large Conservative donor and a Conservative peer, actually. Well, up next, we'll try to work out what an incoming Burnham administration might offer businesses and workers.
First Minister, how are you?
Good morning. Good morning.
Nice to see you. How are you feeling?
Looking forward to getting into the parliamentary chamber.
Are you any further forward to making a decision?
No, it's an important day today.
All of the claims were in line with my parliamentary duties, so I'm making that clear to you, Conor.
He was a Scot through and through.
He was a very good politician.
Alex Salmond was controversial, he was a disruptor, but above all, he was respected.
Will you resign if you lose this week?
Again, I'm not planning to, of course, lose the vote of no confidence. I'm planning to win that vote of no confidence.
His face said it all.
My intention to stand down as party leader.
This is now a storm with deadly consequences. How are they feeling?
They're a bit scared at the minute.
We've been told to evacuate.
How are you feeling?
Devastated.
Hundreds of homes were wiped out by flooding. I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent.
It was probably the darkest time in my life.
Scott is 5 years sober after a cocaine addiction left him close to death.
Scotland has a shameful record. Worse than England, the worst in Europe.
Why not just say you failed? Because then you might get more respect from families who've lost loved ones.
This is where one of the UK's most prolific rapists thought he'd got away with murder.
Sky News can reveal that former sex workers had told police he was sexually violent.
My Emma.
Free wherever you get your news.
It's over, isn't it? The Americans say he is Rossi, a fraudster.
This has been one of the most bizarre cases ever heard in a courtroom in this country.
A dangerous murderer.
Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive Andrew Ennis after this?
She said she can forgive him, but as long as he's behind bars.
By doing the right thing, it's destroyed your life.
They terrorised me. They intimidated me. I'm so grateful.
Sky News, the full story first.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today.
Congratulations, this is a huge moment.
But what happens now?
Hear that whistle and that crunch. We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Big Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway. Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
In just a few days' time, the United Kingdom will have a new Prime Minister, the MP from Makerfield, who was elected in a by-election just a few weeks back. But there's no nationwide election, not even a leadership contest in his party. And with no new manifesto or even that much comment on policies we've been discussing, we don't really know what Andy Burnham will do. So let's speak to some people who will no doubt have plenty of requests. The TUC General Secretary, Paul Nowak, and CBI Director General, Rain Newton-Smith. Good morning to both of you.
Morning.
Good morning.
Let's start with what you would like Andy Burnham to deliver. Rain, what's top of your agenda?
Well, I think we want him to lean into the mood of optimism we're seeing in the country this morning. And essentially, I think what we need him to is to back business to deliver the higher living standards and thriving communities and regions around the UK. I think that's what we want to see. And perhaps a recognition that this is an evolution, not a revolution. There's many things that the government have already put in place, whether it's industrial strategy, whether it's backing investment in capital infrastructure. But the challenge is we're not seeing all of the fruits of that on the ground at the moment. We need to be building more homes. We need to be building more reservoirs. And we need to be backing our businesses to really help drive the investment we need to see in our local communities and the jobs that we want to create.
Well, what in practice do they then have to do? Because, for example, you've just mentioned they need to be building new homes. Now, they promised, or their target, I beg your pardon, was 1.5 million homes over the Parliament. I haven't got the numbers right in front of me, but I don't think they have even tickled 200,000 in a year, and they need to get to 300,000 on average over the 5 years, and they are already way behind. What do they actually need to do to make any of that happen? Rather than, because we've heard all the words about devolution and this and that and the other, but what do they actually need to do?
Well, I think there's three parts. I would say leaning into the experience that Andy Burnham has built up in Manchester, where there's been partnership with businesses to deliver some of those homes and the urban regeneration we've seen in Manchester. So some of it is, first of all, about making sure planning decisions are taken and followed through. Second of all, homes are built by people, and we need to make sure we're investing in the skills to deliver construction. And we've got to not make it harder for our businesses who operate in construction to deliver the investment we need. And that means not increasing the overall burden on business. We can't see a summer of speculation of further tax rises, which increase the cost on business and therefore makes it harder for them to invest and to build homes and create that wealth that we desperately need to see in this country.
So no wealth taxes and so on. OK, Paul, what's on your ask list?
Well, the key thing for me, Trevor, is Andy Burnham and his government delivering the change that people voted for back in July 2024. And I think there's been lots of good things the government has done over the last 2 years, but for far too many people, change feels a long way off. So I think absolutely a focus on getting our economy growing, but in a way that benefits working people. Andy's talked a lot about reindustrialisation. I think that's really important, building on the work the government's already done around industrial strategy, but putting good quality employment at the heart of that. So delivering in full the outstanding elements of the Employment Rights Act is important. He's talked about giving ordinary working families some breathing space, and I think that's really important. I mean, we've still got people, it may not make the newspaper headlines in the way it did 2 years ago, but stuck firmly in the middle of that cost of living crisis. And we know, for example, energy bills are going to hit people hard come the autumn. I mean, the average bill has gone up by £2,500 since 2021. So we've said that there should be a targeted increase in taxes, restoring the bank surcharge to at least the level it was before the Tories cut it in 2023. And that would pay for a social tariff that would support millions of families. There's lots of other things that Andy could do, but I think what he's got to do is spend the first 100 days of his new government showing working people and their families and communities he is firmly on their side.
OK, well, look, I don't think anybody's going to argue about more growth or more jobs or more homes. Everybody, you know, everybody likes good things. But perhaps another way to think about this is if there's something that you'd like them to stop doing, and I think, Rain, I may be right in imagining that a lot of your members would really like them to stop the Employment Rights Act and its provisions in its tracks.
Well, I think what we want to see is it's an Employment Rights Act that works for people. And I think if there's one a mood of optimism as well from what Andy Burnham has set up, it's moving away from adversarial politics. And I think business want to work with unions to create jobs, to create investment, to create higher living standards. But one of the challenges we face with the Employment Rights Act at the moment is it's adding to the risks when businesses create jobs, and in particular when they take people who've been out of work for a period of time. And we know in this country we've got 1 million young people who are not in education or training and are out of work. And we've got our youth unemployment at the moment is higher than the European average. No one voted for that. And I think what we want to see is how we as a CBI, other business organizations, can work with Paul, his colleagues at the TUC and others to make sure that the Employment Rights Act does see a change in some of the employment rights, but that it doesn't have an impact on firms' ability to create jobs. And I think there is a way that we can end up with an Employment Rights Act that delivers for people. But at the moment, that's not where it's at.
Paul, am I right in thinking that whereas I think Rain, from what she just said, thinks that you could work together, you could find a way through that meets some business people's complaint that it's burdening them with taxes and so on. You see the Act actually as a floor on which to build.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the employment rights is absolutely essential in improving the quality of working life for millions of people. And the status quo is broken. At the moment, we've got a situation where over 1 million people are on exploitative 0 hours contracts, not knowing from 1 week to the next how much they're going to earn. Up until very recently, and because of the Employment Rights Act, there were 8 million people not getting sick pay when they were ill from the first day. So the status quo isn't working for millions. Absolutely, I am sure that Andy Burnham and unions and working people generally want to work with employers. That's what we do day in, day out in workplaces. In Manchester, actually, Andy pioneered a really good model, a good employment charter, where he brought together unions and employers to think about how we improve employment rights. But I would say 2 things about the Employment Rights Act. First of all, it's good for good employers and good for the UK economy. At the moment, we've got employers who are in danger of being undercut by the cowboys. Having more people in secure employment is a good thing. Second thing, and this is really important for the new government, this was part of Labour's manifesto commitments in July 2024. But crucially, it's popular with voters right across the spectrum. It doesn't matter whether you voted for Labour at the election in 2024 or Reform, or the Conservatives, the Lib Dems or Greens. People are overwhelmingly in favour of the provisions in the Employment Rights Act. So I want to see it delivered in full and at pace, and I think that's entirely compatible with a strong, growing economy. Of course, we've got to tackle the issue about young people not being in work and education, but there is no evidence at all that it's decent employment rights that's preventing them entering the labour market. As Alan Milburn has been very clear, this is a structural set of issues in the UK economy, and one that we've been harbouring and incubating for the thick end of a decade.
Can I just ask both of you and I have to ask you to be brief on this, what do you most fear from this new government, Rain?
I think we just can't have a summer of speculation about increasing tax rises. And I think we really need to see a pragmatic vision delivered where we cannot address the cost of living without addressing the cost of doing business. It's about how businesses, unions and government work together to deliver higher living standards. So we want to see that social partnership in action, listening to what businesses are saying, because no one voted for higher youth unemployment. No one voted.
Briefly, what worries you most about what might happen?
My fear would be we'd have another wasted opportunity to deliver the change that people voted for. And I think, there will be a real bounce for Andy Burnham and his new government. It's time to use that first 100 days, as I say, with every policy, every announcement, everything the government does, show working class people and the communities you're on their side and you're batting for them.
Rain, Paul, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
In just a moment, we'll hear once again from our panel.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Well, back now with our panel, Iain, Annabel and Steve. Annabel, I didn't quite hear a great meeting of minds there between Ray Newton-Smith and Paul Nowak. Rachel Reeves is saying this morning elsewhere that Andy Burnham needs to come into number 10 with a policy. Well, yeah, that's a surprise, isn't it? Honestly, what could he do that's different?
Well, I mean, Rachel Reeves could have come into number 11 2 years ago with a policy, but instead she was too busy talking about how she was the country's first female Chancellor before she'd actually achieved anything in that role. And at the time, we thought that there wouldn't be any tax increases beyond those set out in the Labour manifesto, only for her, in her first budget that October, to raise them by £40 billion. Now, on the tax front, Andy Burnham has talked about a land value tax, revaluing council tax bans. Now, this is an idea that has, in principle, quite broad appeal. However, because it will ensure that land is put to more productive use. However, these council tax bans haven't been revalued since the 1990s, and the administrative costs would be absolutely vast. We've long known that Andy Burnham is very keen to impose a wealth tax. That would be a popular, if slightly controversial measure, unpopular with some, that would be extremely damaging to the economy in terms of investment. We see a lot of talent and capital flight. Devolution has, again, quite broad spectrum appeal, but we need to bear in mind that it's going to cost money, as all local government reorganisations do. So the question again is, how is Andy Burnham going to fund it? I think we can expect more regulations being imposed on businesses along the lines that Paul Nowak would like to see. I would have rather that the chief executive of the CBI had actually suggested we raise that legislation to the ground, because it will have a damaging impact on job creation and businesses' ability to grow, which is ultimately what we need. They're the engine that powers our economy. But at the moment, it's all quite vague, so let's see.
Well, let's take that agenda one, but let's talk about the wealth tax. This would be quite popular in the party, wouldn't it, Steve?
Well, it depends what you mean by it. I mean, I hear this phrase mentioned often, but then you have to go to some sort of specific policy. What is absolutely clear, and I find this so interesting, like my two fellow panellists, my guesses would support big increases in defence spending.
Correct.
Where's the money going to come from? I worry that a lot of that would be wasted, but they will want it. The Tories campaigned in election after election for a national social care policy. Andy Burnham almost introduced one when he was Health Secretary and is passionate about the need. Well, we need the money for it. And so there is this weird debate in Britain where people call for tax cuts but also want increases in public spending. Well, I want increases in public spending, but except for now, you're going to have to find tax rises. So on that, Wes Streeting, for example, has suggested capital gains or property is treated the same as income, as one possible way through. But how they're going to have to find it, yes, over time, economic growth is the key. And so look at what Andy Haldane and others are saying about that.
Andy Haldane, who is one of Andy Burnham's new economic advisors.
Yeah, exactly. And investment in infrastructure, transport, which makes a huge difference quickly. Listen to Andy Burnham on housing and a renewed focus on that. You're right to say they're nowhere near their target. But of course this needs investment, and they're going to have to find ways of doing it.
But they could make, just very quickly, they could cut spending in other areas, the most obvious one being welfare, which is going to cost us £400 billion a year by the end of this decade. I don't believe that any Prime Minister is going to really grasp the nettle and fix our broken economy without a willingness to drastically reduce the benefits thereof.
Everyone's in agreement about that. Everyone's in agreement. It's how you do it. And And I think that will be one of the themes.
Well, this programme, no, not this programme, me, campaign for doing something on the triple lock, which costs enormous amounts of money. Everybody agrees it's unsustainable, and everybody agrees you can't do anything about it.
Well, let's compare notes on this, because I suspect you have the same experience as me on the triple lock, where I interview politicians about it and they'll say, no, we're completely committed to it. As soon as the mic goes off, they say, well, of course, we know it's got to go.
100%.
And it's outrageous. We need to get a cadre of politicians who are willing to confront the difficult issues. And at the moment, and I would say this for all parties, they're not. I mean, Kemi Badenoch does a good job in talking tough about confronting difficult issues, but even she's totally committed to the
But Annabel's point is that he's at his most popular now. He could do it.
Well, all prime ministers are most popular the day they move into office, and their power and influence gradually deteriorates afterwards. Look, the key to all of this is to get growth. But we have a Labour government, and it will be the same with Andy Burnham, that doesn't have... Well, at the moment, there is not a single person in the Labour cabinet that's ever run a business. You have to understand the way business works and then not introduce policies which are anti-growth. And that's what Rachel Reeves has done, and she doesn't actually even realise it now.
In just a moment, we'll hear once again from our panel.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first. Okay, there's a lot of firing going on.
Can you explain to me why? We're journalists, eh?
Let's go. Watch, wait, we're going to get in. Right, get in.
We just want to ask you a few questions about your involvement with ISIS. Next step for them quite often is getting on a boat and sailing illegally over into Europe.
Es un solo procesamiento, una sola sacada.
Oh my goodness. Whoa, oh my goodness. If you weren't affected, you'd be a bit of a strange person.
Turn off the camera, turn around and go away.
Okay, but
Listen, I told you 3 times.
They saw 2 guys, 2 bad people.
There's an absolutely packed dinghy.
that is what it's like. Sometimes you have to put in an awful lot of hard work. It's worth doing. I suppose it is what we do.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live. I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'll always remember going into Gaza City during the war, and all around us was destruction and the sound of battle. I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Middle East correspondent.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today
Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Dermot Monaghan presented the Sunday morning politics programme at Sky News for 5 years, and he was a lead presenter here for 10 more. His career spanned 5 decades, starting in local news before becoming a household name with high-profile roles at the BBC, ITV and Channel 4. He brought the most important news of recent years to the nation with a calm, well-informed authority that made him widely respected. He was just 68 when he died yesterday, and as you can imagine, that news was met with profound sadness here, where to many he was more than an extraordinarily talented colleague, but a great friend. Well, it says so much about Dermot that the tributes to him have come from across the political spectrum, from different generations, and from all who worked with him. Once diagnosed with the prostate cancer that in the end would take his life, he campaigned passionately to raise awareness, money and for the rollout of widespread screening at earlier ages that he believed would save many lives. Everyone on this programme and, of course, at Sky News as a whole, sends our deepest condolences to his family and friends this Sunday morning. Iain, you must have known Dermot.
Didn't know him well, but I did various interviews with him and met him on quite a few occasions. He's a transparently nice man, and in the news business, you can't say that about everybody. He was a good interviewer. He was fascinated by politics. Whenever I would see him, he'd say, "Come on then, dish the gossip." And hugely well-informed. He wasn't an aggressive interviewer, but I mean, I think you and I both agree that in the modern day, aggressive interviews are quite counterproductive. And I think politicians enjoy the experience of being interviewed by him. And yeah, a great guy.
Yeah. Well, he actually, I think, stuck to a rule which we have on this programme, which is a good interview is one in which the answer is more important and interesting than the question. What, did you know him, Annabel?
No, I didn't, but of course he was a very well-respected individual in the field, and I think he deserves particular credit for the courage and openness with which he discussed his diagnosis and the great lengths that he went to raise awareness and ultimately try to persuade more men over the age of 50 in particular to get that screening. And if you look at what happened in the aftermath of the terribly sad death of Dame Deborah James, and the massive surge in the number of people going for bowel cancer screening. I think it was 50% increase over the course of a decade. Now, that was because of increased eligibility and those sorts of things as well. But it just goes to show the impact that figures in the public domain can have in hopefully saving
It really does.
lives.
When he announced his diagnosis, I did an hour-long phone-in on my show about it. And 3-4 months after that, I had several emails from men who said, if I hadn't listened to your programme that night, I wouldn't have got tested, and I was positive. And the fact that I did listen to it because of Dermot, that they're now alive today in a way they might not have been before.
Yeah, no, I knew him quite well. He lived near us and did the programme with him quite often. And it was never about him. That was one of his strengths. He had a curiosity about what was happening, and that drove his journalism. Also, it's so arbitrary, this cancer thing. He was incredibly fit. I know you are, but he used to cycle in to present.
I know.
Every time I saw him in
annoyingly fit.
Annoyingly fit. And then he used to cycle back and do those shots then of him in his bike gear. But that's also part of his modesty in a way. He'd say, "Oh yeah, I just cycled in. Yeah, it was a good, nice bike ride today." I mean, it was so. And then you get struck by this cancer. I mean, it's not fair, is it?
It's of course the last part of its campaign. I think people who were in that campaign are rather disappointed that the government or the screening authority decided not to bring in screening. Do you think, Iain, that this might give Dermot's passing might give us another shot at that?
Well, I hope so, because there are all sorts of different screenings that could be introduced at comparatively little cost. Osteoporosis, for example, which costs the NHS a lot of money. For £30 million, you could introduce a national screening system, which would mean that in the long term, you would save money.
Thank you all very much. It's been a rather sombre morning in many ways, but that is it for this week's show. I'll be back next Sunday.